I still remember the ice in my veins that day. You know that feeling when you're so angry that you actually become calm, like eerily calm. That's where I was when I walked into Andiamo, my ex-husband Caleb's favorite restaurant, the place he'd taken her on their first date. While we were still married. The same place. They were now celebrating finalizing our divorce and their new beginning with a baby on the way. God, even thinking about it now makes my hands shake a little. Sorry, I should back up. I'm Riley. 3 years ago, I was Riley Bennett, married to Caleb Bennett, the regional sales director for a tech supply firm. We'd been married for 7 years, not perfect, but whose marriage is? We had our comfortable routines, our inside jokes, our plans for the future. At least I thought we did. I first noticed something was off when Caleb started working late, like really late, about once a week, always Thursdays. He'd come home smelling like he showered at the gym, which wasn't unusual since he claimed he was working out to relieve stress after long client strategy meetings. The new cologne should have been my first clue. Who wears cologne to the gym at 8 p.m.? Business is really picking up, he'd say, kissing my forehead absently. New product launch, you know how it goes. And I believed him. Believed him with the kind of blind faith that only comes when you've built years of trust, when you've shared toothbrushes and tax returns and talked about baby names at 2 a.m. That's what made the betrayal so complete. Not just the lie, but how effortlessly I accepted it. How I didn't even think to question him. I was so deep in my own tunnel vision, chasing billable hours and proving myself at the firm, I didn't see my marriage slipping through the cracks. That's what kills me the most. Looking back, I actually believed him. It was Lena from my cycling group who saw them first. She didn't want to tell me, nobody wants to be that messenger, but she saw them at a rooftop bar across town, looking very comfortable. Her hand on his thigh, his fingers playing with her hair. You know the scene. I'm so sorry, Riley, Lena had whispered, clutching my hand across my kitchen island. I thought you should know. I remember nodding mechanically, like one of those dashboard toys, just up and down, while my entire life crumbled inside me. When I confronted Caleb that night, he denied it at first. Classic. Then, when I mentioned Lena had seen them, he switched to minimizing. It's nothing serious, Riley, just a work thing. You and I have been so distant lately. Distant? I was working 60-hour weeks trying to make partner at my law firm, and he knew that was temporary. We talked about it. He'd said he supported me. Eventually, after 3 hours of circular arguments, half-truths, and watching the man I loved become a stranger before my eyes, he admitted it. Her name is Camille. She's our new marketing director. Of course she was. Camille Rhodes, 15 years younger than him, former college volleyball player with the kind of effortless beauty that made other women feel instantly inadequate. I'd met her once at a company retreat months before. She'd been so friendly, asking about my career, commenting on my earrings, all while apparently calculating how to slide into my marriage. It just happened, Riley. I didn't plan it. Affairs don't just happen. They're a series of choices, hundreds of tiny moments where you could turn back but don't. I spent that night in our guest room, staring at the ceiling, remembering our wedding vows, how sincere he'd sounded, how I'd believed that when Caleb promised forever, he meant it. I thought that was rock bottom. I was wrong. 6 weeks later, just as I was trying to decide whether to attempt marriage counseling or call a divorce attorney, Caleb came home with a look on his face I'll never forget. Equal parts panic and excitement. We need to talk, he said, setting his keys on the counter carefully, like they might explode. I remember every detail of that moment, the fading sunlight streaming through our kitchen windows, the smell of the pasta I'd been cooking, his favorite, ironically, because I thought maybe a nice dinner might help us have a real conversation, the distant sound of our neighbors' kids laughing outside. Camille's pregnant. 2 words that shattered whatever was left of us. It's mine, he added unnecessarily, as if I might have hoped otherwise. I didn't cry, not then. I just felt this strange hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left nothing but an echo chamber. How far along? My voice didn't even sound like mine. Almost 3 months. The timeline told me everything. This hadn't been a recent slip-up. This had been going on for months before I even knew. While I was working late to build our future, they were creating one. Without me. He moved out that weekend. Said he needed to do the right thing by Camille and the baby. As if abandoning your wife was ever the right thing. The divorce proceedings were swift but brutal. Caleb wanted it done quickly, no surprise there, with a baby on the way. I watched him transform from the man who once held me through my brother's funeral to someone who argued through his lawyer about who should keep our wedding china. He didn't even want it. He just didn't want to seem like the bad guy, giving up everything. But here's the thing about being a lawyer yourself. You know how to prepare. And sometimes you notice things others miss. The first red flag appeared during a settlement meeting. Camille came along, already showing, in a tight dress that seemed designed specifically to twist the knife. But it wasn't her presence that caught my attention. It was the way she kept checking her phone, stepping out to take calls. Something felt off. She's just nervous about the baby, Caleb explained, but the look in his eyes suggested he wasn't entirely convinced himself. The second flag came when I overheard her talking to someone in the hallway outside our mediator's office. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but her voice carried. "Don't worry about him," she was saying. "He has no idea. Just keep it together for a few more months." At the time, I assumed she was talking about the stress of the divorce on Caleb. Later I'd understand, it was something else entirely. The third flag was the most unsettling. At a required court appearance, I noticed something strange. Camille actively avoiding Julian, Caleb's best friend since college. Julian had shown up to support Caleb, which wasn't unusual. They'd been inseparable since freshman year at Northwestern. What was unusual was how Camille physically turned away when Julian approached. How she suddenly needed to use the restroom when he joined our awkward pre-hearing cluster in the hallway. I'd always liked Julian. He was that rare kind of friend who stayed close through all of life's transitions. College to career, bachelor to married man. He'd been Caleb's best man at our wedding, giving a toast that made everyone both laugh and cry. He was at our home for holidays, birthdays, Super Bowl parties, a constant presence, reliable and genuine. So Camille's obvious discomfort around him struck me as deeply strange. Julian seemed different too, subdued, almost unable to look Caleb in the eye. I filed these observations away, not yet understanding their significance. 3 days after that court appearance, my doorbell rang at 9:30 p.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. Since Caleb left, my social circle had contracted significantly. Amazing how many couple friends suddenly have scheduling conflicts when you're newly single. I peered through the peephole to see Julian standing on my porch, shoulders hunched, hands jammed in his pockets. He looked terrible. Unshaven, hair disheveled, dark circles beneath his eyes. "Julian?" I opened the door, genuinely confused. We'd been friendly over the years, but he'd never visited me alone. "Is everything okay?" "Okay." He looked up, and I was startled to see his eyes were red-rimmed. "No," he said simply. "Nothing's okay. Can I come in? I need to talk to you." I stepped aside, leading him to the kitchen where I'd been sorting through bills. The house felt too big now, too empty, but I'd refused to be the one to move out. This was my home too. "Damn it. Do you want something to drink?" I offered automatically. "Coffee? Wine? Something stronger?" "Whatever you're having," he mumbled, sinking into a chair at my kitchen island. I poured us both a glass of the Cabernet I'd opened earlier. Julian took his with a shaking hand and immediately drank half of it. "I've been trying to do the right thing," he began, staring into his glass, trying to figure out what that even is anymore. "But I can't sleep. I can't eat. I can't look at myself in the mirror." I waited, sensing whatever he needed to say required patience. "It's about Camille," he finally continued. "And the baby." My stomach tightened. "What about them?" Julian set his glass down and covered his face with his hands. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. "The baby might be mine, Riley." The words hung in the air between us. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. "What are you saying, Julian?" He took a deep, shuddering breath. "Camille and we were together before she and Caleb. At least, I thought it was before. Now, I'm not so sure about the timeline." "You and Camille?" I couldn't keep the shock from my voice. Julian had always seemed so steady, so loyal. It started at the company Christmas party last year. Caleb left early, had that flight to Phoenix the next morning, remember? I nodded. Julian continued. Camille and I ended up talking at the bar. One thing led to another. I'm not proud of it. It was supposed to be a one-time thing. He paused. But it wasn't. I guessed. Julian shook his head miserably. We kept meeting up for about 2 months. Then suddenly, she ghosted me. No explanation. Next thing I know, Caleb's telling me they're seeing each other. I was stunned. But what could I say? Hey man, I was sleeping with her first. So you said nothing, I filled in. I thought it was over between us. Julian defended weakly. I figured she'd chosen him over me. It hurt, but Caleb's my best friend. I wanted him to be happy. Until you found out she was pregnant, I concluded. Julian nodded, finishing his wine in one long swallow. The timing? It could be either of us. And lately, she's been texting me again, calling late at night, saying things like how she made a mistake, choosing Caleb, how we should talk about options. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages before handing it to me. I read through the texts from Camille, my shock deepening with each one. This should have been their news to share, not mine and his. We need to talk about what happens after the baby comes. I made a mistake. Caleb doesn't need to know everything. We could work something out. The most recent one, from just yesterday. The baby's starting to kick. Don't you want to feel it? Each word was a knife, reopening wounds I thought had already scarred over. The casual cruelty of it, the way she tried to pull Julian back into her orbit like nothing had happened, like no lives were imploding around her, made my skin crawl. I handed the phone back, feeling sick. Have you told Caleb? How can I? Julian looked anguished. It would destroy him. He's so excited about being a father. He's reading baby books, painting the nursery. He bought a minivan, for God's sake. But if the baby isn't his... That's why I'm here, Julian interrupted. I don't know what to do, but I can't keep living with this. And I thought, you deserve to know, after everything Caleb put you through. I sat down across from him, trying to process it all. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out everything but the echo of Camille's words. How many layers of betrayal could one person be responsible for? Do you have any proof? Besides these texts? Julian hesitated, then nodded slowly. I have pictures from when we were together, and there's a hotel receipt. We stayed at the Westin downtown one weekend when Caleb was at that sales conference in Phoenix. The dates? I asked. They're right when the baby would have been conceived, according to what Caleb told me about the due date. My mind was racing, assembling puzzle pieces. And there's more, I said slowly. Isn't there? Julian looked surprised. What do you mean? You wouldn't be here just because of old hotel receipts and some suggestive texts. Something else happened, recently. He stared at me for a long moment, then reached back for his phone. She sent me this, 2 days ago. He pulled up a video message and pressed play. Camille's face filled the screen, her expression intimate, secretive. Hey you, she cooed. I miss seeing you. We need to figure this out before things get too complicated. The doctor says it's a boy. By the way, he looks just like you in the ultrasound. I swear, he has your nose, she laughed softly. Caleb doesn't suspect anything. He's so caught up in the daddy fantasy. He hasn't even questioned why. I won't let him come to the appointments anymore. We need to talk, for real. Call me. I felt a cold rage building inside me as the video ended. Not just for myself, but for Caleb too. Whatever he'd done to me, he didn't deserve this level of manipulation. I wish I'd never met her, Julian whispered. She's destroying everything. I looked at him thoughtfully. Does she know you have all this? The texts, the video, the receipts? No, he said. I've just been collecting it. I guess, trying to figure out what to do. A plan began forming in my mind, not for revenge, at least not entirely. For truth, for clarity, for consequences. I heard through the grapevine, they're having a celebration dinner, I said carefully. At Andiamo, once the divorce is final, to celebrate their new beginning. Julian winced. Yeah, Friday night. Caleb invited me, but I told him I couldn't make it, couldn't stomach it. I reached across the table and took his hand. What if we both went? What if we brought all of this with us? He pulled back, eyes wide. You want to confront them? Publicly? I want the truth to come out, I corrected. In a way that can't be denied or minimized or explained away later. Don't you think Caleb deserves that much? Julian was quiet for a long time. Finally, he nodded slowly. Yeah, he does, but this will destroy our friendship. Your friendship was destroyed the moment Camille came between you, I said gently. This is just acknowledging the wreckage. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Julian sent me everything. He had dozens of texts, emails, photos, videos, all pointing to one inescapable conclusion. Camille had been involved with both men simultaneously, and the baby she was carrying was almost certainly Julian's. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. Camille's own sister, Erica. I'd only met Erica a couple of times at company functions, but she always seemed different from Camille. More grounded, less flashy. When I reached out to her, explaining what we'd discovered, she wasn't surprised. Camille's done this before, Erica told me over coffee, her voice barely above a whisper. In college, with her economics professor, then with her boss at her first job. She targets men with potential, men who can give her the lifestyle she thinks she deserves. And the baby? I asked, already knowing the answer. She's been telling me it's Julian's, Erica confirmed, looking down at her hands. But Caleb has better long-term prospects. She's keeping Julian on the hook as insurance. She looked up at me, regret in her eyes. I should have said something sooner. She's my sister. But this has gone too far. Erica gave me her own evidence. Screenshots of conversations where Camille had explicitly laid out her plan to secure her future with whichever man proved most advantageous. There was even a photo Camille had sent Erica of the ultrasound with the caption, "Baby looks just like Julian. Thank God." Caleb's nose would be a tragedy to pass on. The night before the dinner, Julian called me, clearly on the verge of backing out. Maybe we should just talk to Caleb privately, he suggested, his voice strained. This public confrontation, it feels cruel. I understood his hesitation. It does feel harsh, I acknowledged. But think about it from Caleb's perspective. If we tell him privately, Camille will have time to spin a counter-narrative, to manipulate him further. You've seen how she operates. Yeah, he admitted reluctantly. And honestly, Riley, part of me wants witnesses. Not for revenge, but for accountability. I spent months being the subject of whispers and pity, while Caleb paraded around with a pregnant girlfriend. Some truths deserve to be acknowledged publicly. After a long silence, Julian sighed. You're right. I'll meet you there tomorrow night. I barely slept that night, questioning and re-questioning my decision. Was I doing this for justice or for vengeance? Was there even a difference at this point? By morning, I'd settled into a strange calm. Whatever my mixed motives, the truth deserved to be heard. I chose my outfit carefully, not to compete with Camille, but to armor myself. A simple navy blue dress I'd worn to argue important cases in court. My power dress. Professional, confident, unassailable. I arrived at Andiamo 10 minutes before the agreed time, clutching a manila envelope containing everything we'd collected. Julian was waiting outside, looking like he might be sick. I don't know if I can do this, he admitted when I approached. I squeezed his arm. You can. We can. It's the right thing, even if it's the hard thing. The hostess recognized me. Of course she did. Caleb and I had been regulars here for years. Mrs. Bennett, she said, then caught herself. I mean, Miss Reed. Back to my maiden name, I said calmly. Are you meeting someone? The Bennett party, I replied. Her eyes widened slightly. Oh, I'm not sure. It's fine, I assured her. We expected a necessary lie. She led us toward the private dining room at the back, her discomfort evident in her stiff posture. I could hear the laughter and conversation before we reached the door. Happy sounds, celebration sounds. When we walked in, the conversations didn't stop immediately. It took a moment, like when you're watching a wave recede from the shore, the silence spreading gradually from where we stood until the entire room fell quiet. Caleb saw us and froze, champagne glass halfway to his lips. Camille, beside him, clutching his arm possessively, visibly paled. Riley, Caleb managed, his voice strained. Then his eyes shifted to Julian, confusion replacing shock. Julian, I thought you couldn't make it. Change of plans, Julian said, his voice surprisingly steady. I smiled, not angrily, not sadly, just a small, composed smile. We thought we should deliver our wedding gift in person. Confusion crossed Caleb's face. Several guests shifted uncomfortably. The divorce was finalized yesterday, Caleb said carefully. There's no need for. Oh, I know, I interrupted, stepping further into the room. That's why the timing seemed perfect. You're celebrating new beginnings, right? Well, I thought you deserved to begin with the truth. Camille's hand tightened on Caleb's arm. I think you should leave, she said, her voice brittle. This is a private party. I could see the slight swell of her belly beneath her red dress, 5 months along now. A child that Caleb believed was his. A future he had destroyed our marriage to pursue. We'll leave soon enough, I promised, opening the folder I'd brought. But first, I think Caleb deserves to know exactly what he's celebrating. Caleb looked between Julian and me, wariness creeping into his expression. What's going on? Julian stepped forward. I need to tell you something, man. Something I should have told you months ago. Julian, don't, Camille hissed. But he continued as if she hadn't spoken. Camille and I were together before you two started dating, Julian said, his voice low but clear in the silent room. At least, that's what I thought. Now I'm not so sure about the timeline. Caleb's face hardened. What are you talking about? We were seeing each other for months, Julian continued. It started at the Christmas party when you left early for that Phoenix trip. Caleb's eyes darted to Camille, who was shaking her head frantically. He's lying, she insisted. We barely knew each other. I wish I was lying, Julian said sadly. He pulled out his phone. But I have proof. Texts, photos, receipts from hotels where we stayed together, including the weekend you were in Phoenix. The weekend that, according to the due date, is when the baby was conceived. The room erupted in whispers. Several guests looked away, embarrassed to be witnessing such a personal implosion. Show me, Caleb demanded, his voice flat. Julian handed him the phone, open to a gallery of evidence. I could see Caleb's fingers trembling slightly as he swiped through each image, each message, like he was bracing for a punch that kept landing over and over. His jaw clenched, shoulders stiff, and for a moment, I thought he might drop the phone. Every shift in his expression was a quiet collapse, a man watching the narrative he'd built around his future unravel in front of strangers. I watched as Caleb scrolled through, his expression shifting from disbelief to shock to devastation. This doesn't prove anything about the baby, Camille tried, desperation creeping into her voice. So what if Julian and I had a thing? It was over before you and I got serious. Then explain this, I said quietly, pulling the ultrasound photo from my folder. The one Camille had sent to her sister with that damning caption. Caleb took it with trembling hands, read the caption, once, twice, looked up at Camille with such raw pain in his eyes that I almost regretted our decision. His lips parted like he was about to say something, but no sound came out. It was the kind of grief that didn't scream. It just sat heavy in the chest, suffocating. Is this true? He asked, his voice barely audible. Is this baby Julian's? The silence that followed was deafening. Someone in the back of the room mumbled an excuse and slipped out. Then another. Soon, a steady stream of guests was making for the exit, uncomfortable witnesses to the unraveling of a fraud. Camille, to her credit, didn't crumble immediately. She tried denial first. Baby, they're making this up, she insisted, reaching for Caleb's hand. He pulled away like her touch burned him. They're bitter. They're trying to ruin our happiness. But her performance lost its power as Julian quietly continued, providing evidence. The video message about the baby having his nose, the texts about their options after the birth, the hotel receipts precisely matching the conception timeline. Ask her about why she won't let you come to the doctor appointments anymore, Julian suggested softly. Caleb's face, already pale, went ashen. Is that true? He asked Camille. Her strategy shifted instantly. You don't understand the pressure I've been under, she cried, tears appearing on cue. I was confused. I didn't know what to do. You knew exactly what you were doing, I corrected calmly, placing Erica's statement on the table. Your own sister confirmed your plan, how you were keeping Julian as insurance while securing Caleb's financial stability. You talked to Erica? Camille gasped, genuine shock replacing her calculated tears. She would never. She did, I confirmed. She said, and I quote, "This has gone too far." Caleb collapsed into his chair, pressing his palms against his eyes. When he looked up, there were tears streaming down his face. Not pretty movie tears, but ugly, broken sobs that shook his shoulders and made his breath come in gasps. The kind of crying that comes from your soul finally understanding it's been lied to. His shoulders trembled like the weight of betrayal had finally sunk in, too heavy to hold up any longer. All that hope, that excitement, the nursery walls he probably painted while smiling, all of it crumbling into something hollow and painful. "I left my wife for you," he choked out, looking at Camille. "I threw away my marriage. For this? For a lie?" Camille's expression hardened. The mask slipped completely, revealing the calculating woman beneath. "Oh, please," she snapped. "You were looking for an exit from your boring marriage long before I came along. I just gave you an excuse." Her words landed with a thud, cruel and clinical, like she was trying to wipe away the last shred of feeling from the room. The guests, already frozen in discomfort, looked like they wanted to vanish into the walls. Her words hit me like a physical blow, but I maintained my composure. This wasn't about me anymore. This was about truth, having its moment, however painful. "When were you going to tell me?" Caleb demanded, looking between Camille and Julian. "After the baby was born? Were you ever going to tell me?" Julian looked genuinely remorseful. "I've been struggling with this for weeks, man. I didn't know what to do. You were so excited about being a dad? So you were just gonna let me raise your child?" Caleb's voice rose, anger breaking through his grief. "Let me believe this lie forever?" "I didn't know for sure," Julian defended weakly. "Not until recently." "Recently?" Caleb echoed. "How recently?" Julian glanced at me, then back to Caleb. "The ultrasound. When she sent me that picture, saying the baby looked like me, that's when I knew. I couldn't keep quiet anymore." Camille scoffed, gathering her purse. "This is ridiculous. I don't have to listen to this." She turned to Caleb. "Are you coming or what?" The remaining guests watched in uncomfortable silence as Caleb stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. "No," he said. "Finally, I'm not coming. Not now. Not ever again." Camille's confidence wavered. This clearly wasn't how she'd expected the confrontation to play out. "Fine," she snapped. "Your loss. There are plenty of other men who would be thrilled to be with me." "Like Julian?" Caleb asked bitterly. Julian flinched visibly at that. "Maybe," she shot back. "At least he knows how to have fun. You were already turning into a boring, predictable husband, just like you were with her." She jerked her head toward me. With that parting shot, she stormed out, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. I should have felt triumphant. This was the moment I'd planned for. Camille exposed, Caleb faced with the reality of his choices. But watching him sitting there, broken and humiliated, I felt only a profound sadness for what we'd all lost. "I should go," I said quietly, gathering the documents. Caleb caught my wrist. "Wait," he said, his voice rough from crying. "Please." The remaining guests took this as their cue to tactfully exit, mumbling awkward goodbyes until only Caleb, Julian, and I remained in the private dining room. "How long have you known?" Caleb asked once we were alone. "About a week," I admitted. "Julian came to me, wasn't sure what to do. We decided you deserved the truth." Caleb nodded slowly, processing. Then he turned to Julian, a lifetime of friendship hanging in the balance between them. "You slept with her while knowing I was interested in her," Caleb said, his voice flat. Julian shook his head. "It started before I knew you were seeing her. I swear. Then, when you told me about you two, I backed off immediately." "But you didn't tell me." "How could I?" Julian asked. "You were already falling for her. You seemed happy, happier than you'd been in a long time." Caleb's laugh was harsh, bitter. "Yeah, because I thought she was carrying my child. I thought I was starting this amazing new chapter." He ran his hands through his hair. "God, I'm such an idiot." "You're not an idiot," I said gently. "You were deceived. We all were." "I threw away everything good in my life for a lie," Caleb whispered, reaching for my hand across the table. "I'm so sorry, Riley, so incredibly sorry." I let him hold my hand for a moment, feeling the familiar warmth of his skin against mine. Once, that touch had meant safety. Home. Now it felt like touching a photograph, a two-dimensional reminder of something that used to be real. "I was wrong," Caleb continued, his eyes pleading. "So terribly wrong. But maybe this is a sign, a chance to start over, to try again." And there it was, the moment I'd both anticipated and dreaded. The part of me that had fantasized about this exact scenario for months should have been rejoicing. But instead, all I felt was a quiet certainty that that chapter of my life was truly finished. It was like looking at a house you once called home, familiar but no longer yours. The foundation had cracked, the walls had shifted, and even though the shape was the same, it could never feel safe again. Julian cleared his throat awkwardly. "I should give you two some privacy," he mumbled, turning to leave. "No," Caleb stopped him. "We're not done yet. Julian, you and I don't know what we are anymore." Julian nodded sadly. "I understand. I betrayed your trust, even if it was before you two were official. I should have told you everything once I knew you were serious about her." "Yes, you should have," Caleb agreed, the anger in his voice mingled with grief. "But that wouldn't have changed what she did. That's on her, not you." The three of us sat in silence for a long moment, the wreckage of our intertwined lives spread out before us like debris after a storm. It was the kind of silence that wasn't empty but full, of unspoken apologies, missed chances, and the bitter residue of what-ifs. Finally, Julian spoke. "What happens now, with the baby?" "I mean," Caleb looked down at his hands. "I guess that's between you and Camille. I'm out of the picture." "I'll do the right thing," Julian promised. "Whatever that is." "Yeah," Caleb nodded distantly. "You always do. Eventually." The words weren't quite forgiveness, but they weren't a complete rejection either, just an acknowledgement of a complex truth. "Caleb," I said gently, withdrawing my hand from his. "What happened tonight doesn't change the past year. It doesn't erase your choices." "I know that," he insisted. "But people make mistakes. Terrible, stupid mistakes. We had 7 good years together. That has to count for something." I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to find the man I'd married in the tear-streaked face before me. He was still handsome, still had those eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. But something essential was missing: the trust. The certainty that this person would always choose me, especially when it was difficult. "It does count for something," I agreed. "It counts for a lot, actually. Those years shaped both of us. But they're behind us now." "It doesn't have to be," Caleb pressed, a desperate edge in his voice. "We could try again. Counseling, a fresh start. I know I don't deserve it, but—" "It's not about deserving," I interrupted gently. "It's about what's right for both of us going forward." I hesitated, then decided he deserved the whole truth. "I've been seeing someone." Caleb's face fell. "Who?" "Logan Reeves." Recognition dawned immediately. Logan and I had dated in college before I met Caleb. We'd reconnected at a conference 6 months after Caleb moved out, both of us single, both a little wiser from our past relationships. "Your college boyfriend," Caleb's tone sharpened. "The one you said was the road not taken." I winced at having those words thrown back at me. I'd shared that sentiment during a late-night conversation early in our marriage, not expecting it to be weaponized years later. "Yes," I acknowledged. "We bumped into each other at the Hastings conference in Chicago. We're taking things slowly, but it's good, Caleb. I'm happy." The revelation seemed to hit him harder than even Camille's betrayal. The possibility of reconciliation, his safety net after Camille's deception, disintegrating before his eyes. "So that's it?" he asked bitterly. "You get your revenge and I get nothing?" The accusation stung, but I refused to be baited. This wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. You deserve to know what kind of person she really is before you built a life with her. I stood up, smoothing my dress. "What you do with that truth is up to you." Julian had remained silent during this exchange, uncomfortable, witnessing such a personal conversation. Now he stood too. "I should go," he said quietly. "Caleb, when you're ready to talk, if you're ever ready, I'll be there." Caleb didn't acknowledge him directly, just gave a small nod without looking up. I gathered my purse and the folder, leaving the evidence behind. Caleb would need it for whatever came next. "Does he make you happy?" Caleb asked as I turned to leave, his voice small. "Happier than I did?" I paused at the door, considering the question. "It's different," I said finally. "I'm different. The past year changed me in ways I'm still discovering." "I loved you?" "You know," Caleb said, "even during everything. I know that sounds impossible, but it's true." "I believe you," I said, surprised to find that I did. "But love isn't always enough, is it? Sometimes trust matters more." As I walked out of Andiamo's that night, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not triumph or vindication or even relief. Just a quiet certainty that I had closed a door that needed closing. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just a subtle internal shift, a weight lifting. A silence inside me that finally didn't ache. That was 8 months ago. The aftermath unfolded in ways none of us could have predicted. Camille moved back to her hometown in Oregon, apparently to be near her family as her due date approached. Julian followed, determined to be present for his child's birth and take responsibility as a father. They're not together romantically. Too much damage has been done, but they're trying to establish a healthy co-parenting relationship for their son's sake. The baby was born 2 months after that night at Andiamo. Liam. 8 pounds, 4 ounces. With Julian's eyes and chin. Unmistakably his father's son. Julian sent me a photo the day Liam was born, his hands cradling the baby, eyes red but shining. There was no caption. He didn't need one. Caleb moved to the company's Seattle office, a fresh start, away from the whispers and pitying glances. We exchange occasional texts, birthdays, major holidays, but nothing substantial. I heard from mutual friends that he's in therapy, trying to understand the choices that led him to where he is. I hope he finds the answers he's looking for. As for me, Logan and I are still together. We bought a house in the suburbs 3 months ago. Nothing fancy, but it has a garden and enough space for his daughter from his previous marriage when she visits on weekends. We're talking about getting married next spring, a small ceremony, just family and close friends. Sometimes, when the house is quiet and the light filters through the kitchen just right, I catch myself smiling for no reason. It feels like breathing again after holding it for years. Sometimes, I think about how differently things might have turned out if Julian had never found the courage to tell the truth. Or if I'd chosen to keep Camille's deception a secret. Would ignorance have been kinder? Would private truth have been enough? But then I remember the look on Caleb's face when he realized he'd been manipulated. Not just by Camille, but by his own willingness to believe what was convenient, rather than what was true. That moment of clarity, however painful, was necessary. For him. For me. For all of us caught in Camille's web of deception. The hardest lesson I've learned through all of this is that sometimes the people we love the most are capable of causing us the greatest pain. But the second hardest lesson is equally important. Surviving that pain doesn't make you bitter, it makes you wiser. I don't regret walking into Andiamo's that night. I don't regret exposing the truth, even publicly. Some revelations need witnesses to prevent them from being rewritten later. What I do regret occasionally are the 7 years I spent with someone who could walk away so easily. But then I remind myself that those years weren't wasted. They were preparing me for where I am now, for who I am now. Not the woman who waited to be chosen, but the one who learned to choose herself. And honestly, I like this version of me much better. She's stronger, clearer about what she wants, less willing to compromise on the things that matter. Sometimes the greatest gift your betrayer can give you is the opportunity to rebuild yourself from the ground up, to create a life that fits who you've become rather than who you once were. So no, this isn't a story about revenge, though it might sound like one on the surface. It's a story about truth, about consequences, about the peace that comes from finally closing a door that needed to be closed, even if someone else opened it first. And most importantly, it's about learning to trust yourself again, when your trust in others has been shattered. Because at the end of the day, that's the foundation everything else is built on. So the story is over, our wonderful friends. Are you still here at this hour? If you are, then maybe something about this journey touched your heart, maybe even mirrored a corner of your own life. And I want to speak to that part of you, the one that stayed, the one that felt the quiet ache of betrayal, the confusion of broken trust, or the quiet triumph of walking away with your dignity intact. What this story reminds us is that healing doesn't always come wrapped in closure or apologies. Sometimes it comes in the form of hard truths, exposed lies, and the decision to choose yourself, even when it's messy. Riley's story isn't just about betrayal. It's about clarity, about finding peace not in revenge, but in truth, about saying, I deserve more, and meaning it. And above all, it's about rebuilding, not the life you planned with someone else, but the life that now fits who you've become. There's a quote by Haruki Murakami that lingers. When you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. That's what the storm is all about. And maybe that's why you stayed, because your own storm is teaching you who you really are. So wherever you are in your story, whether you're still in the storm or just finding your feet on the other side, I want you to remember, you are not alone. You are not broken. You are becoming. If this story moved you, even in the smallest way, please like, share, and subscribe. Let someone else know they're not alone either. And let this channel be your quiet place for truth, healing, and stories that see you right where you are. We'll be right here. Until the next story.